Right. Who's ready to join me to get back into these day texts? I'm enjoying them. I know most of you are as well because the material is so interesting, isn't it, when we go over it? I mean, we've all read it before, these day texts in Genesis. But I think the way we're doing it now, that is on a regular basis, really considering the descriptions from a scientific point of view that includes God, right? Because eternal life that's intelligent, since life can only come from life, is a scientific argument for God. That is, if we can show that life is eternal and that life is the source of life, which we can, then it's not hard at all to show that life is intelligent and that this eternal life that gave life to life, that is also demonstrably intelligent, exists and is what we call God. And through history, we look at the records, we look at the testimonies of others, famous individuals, and evidence geologically to see whether it matches their depiction of events, all of which in the most credible texts speak of the God Jah and of his creation of the earth, the heavens and the earth, the preparation of the earth with an atmosphere that separates waters, that allows for light, and then a division between day, the light, and night, which was established by the bringing forth of luminaries, the greater luminary to, as the Bible says, rule the day, and the lesser luminary to rule the night, the sun and the moon, and all the stars. So these things are here. We can look at them now. We can look at them now, and we can look at how they're described by the writers of these texts in terms of when they were first laid down. And all of it fits. Everything to this point fits. So we're not only equipped to show scientifically that life gives life to life and therefore must be eternal, because life's here now, and it's intelligent because of all the different types of life that are not accidental, not mutated in ways that are not fit for their environment. They provide utility. They're doing different things. They're fully formed. They're not falling over, or unless it's a real mutation, right? These species of creatures, the different types, are not mutants. They're not accidental formations. The mutants, or the accidents, the things that aren't a part of the normal types of living creatures, are the exceptions. Yet many people, scientists, have made, quote unquote, the mutants or the exceptions today essentially the rule, right? I mean, we've all come from accidents, random mutations through time and based on environment, which would have to already be in place in order for things to accidentally arrive. So it's good to know that we're not dependent upon that kind of theory. And everyone accepts that evolution in that sense is a theory. Yet they believe it as if it's a scientific fact, right? They really do. Because it's promoted in place of the more obvious view, what I just described. Eternal life, giving life to life, that we can prove because we're alive right now. So it doesn't matter how hard it is to grasp in terms of how life could always be around. We're proving it right now. If we're here, life must have preceded us to give us life, and therefore all the way back, never a break in the chain. Or there'd be no life, because we cannot show that life can form accidentally apart from existing life. I've written about it, we talked about it in prior shows, but it's important to state up front for this video because we're going to be getting into the finalization of the creation by the God Jah, at least in terms of the Genesis account that describes his bringing forth the heavens and the earth, the preparation of it, light, dark, plants, seeds, trees, birds, separation of the waters above and below, and the aquatic types. All of the things that we showed in our last video, just part of them, of course, because we don't even know, or neither have any of us seen all of the different things that Jah has made, whether above or below. And now we're going to talk about us and other creatures who are in this description grouped together with us for a good reason. We dwell on the land. We're not flying types, and we're not aquatic types. We don't live in the ocean. We can go up and we can go down, but we don't live that way. And so we're made from the ground, which we'll get to further in more detail later. But in today's text, we're going to talk about the creatures of the ground. And so I wanted to both introduce the basis for our belief in Jah at all, right? The summary of life, giving life to life, life demonstrably being intelligent, and then the scientific descriptions of Genesis of the creation, which we're going to complete today, at least in terms of one account. So let's take a look. Genesis 1:24 through 27. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. You know, I try to keep these day text shows to 45 minutes or less, because I know usually during the week when we do these texts, most of us have to work or do different things. So I want to get us started, but then get us going into what we also have to complete. And then if you can't watch all the video, you can catch it later. But I'm a little sensitive to that. And I think we can complete most of these day texts in a reasonable period of time, unless it's a special case. And we also do them on the weekend at times. So we can spend a little more of our Saturdays, for example, than during the week. So let's get going. Verses 24 through 27, 4 texts. I'm going to read the Hebrew translation and then the Greek. I'll comment at times, and then we'll summarize and discuss it further at the end. Verse 24, Hebrew translation. Then God began to say, the earth must bring forth living souls according to their types, land animals, crawling creatures, and other living things of the earth, according to each living thing's type. So it came about, just like that. Verse 24, Greek translation. Then God said, the earth must bring forth life, a class of things living according to their type, 4-footed land animals, reptiles, and other animals of the earth, according to each type. So it came about, just like that. Verse 25, Hebrew translation. Then God began to make a class of living things belonging to the earth or land, according to each type. The land animal according to its type, and every crawling creature of the ground according to its type. I saw Dada. And God saw that all of this was a good thing. Verse 25, Greek translation. Then God made the animals of the earth according to each type, and pack animals according to their type, as well as all the reptiles according to their type. And God saw that all of this was good. Verse 26, Hebrew translation. Then God began to say, we must make mankind in our likeness, similar to us. And they must rule among the fish of the sea and among the flying creatures of the heavens, the sky heavens, and among the land animals, and among all the living things of the earth, and among all the crawling creatures which are moving upon the earth. Verse 26, Greek translation. Then God said, we should make mankind according to our likeness, similar to us. And they must rule the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky heaven, and the pack animals, and everything belonging to the earth, and all of the reptiles which are moving upon the earth. Then God, we don't often get Dada. He's coming over to visit Joji, whom I call Good Girl. I got both of them here. It's best to keep them. Plus, we're talking about animals, right? And types. Look at Dada. He's got his own type. Beautiful. He kind of looks like he has a face on the back. But he's a magnificent creature, of course. So best to do this, though, than have them contained or, try to get in, I find. So, and as I say, it accents the reading today. So, but they were a little bit tense right there. I heard Good Girl start to growl when Dada came over. So I had to separate them. Okay. Verse 27, our last text, Hebrew translation. Then God began to make mankind in his likeness. As a likeness of God, he created mankind. As a man and as a woman, God created them. Verse 27, Greek translation. Then God made mankind according to an image of God. He made him. As a man and as a woman, God made them. Okay, now we'll save tomorrow's reading has a little bit more, of course, that finishes off this part of Genesis, but I saved it for tomorrow's reading so we could talk further about it, because as you can see, we've got a lot here. I mean, you saw that in prior videos, the things that we've discussed, especially as we got to the plant, seeds, trees, birds, fish, and sea creatures. I mean, there's just not enough time to go over even one or two of each type because, well, there's so much information we could talk about and that you can use to talk to others, share with others. But most people know about or can find out if they really want. Still, sometimes maybe people need a reminder. We do. I know I do. And we're reading these texts together, so we forget because of the things we have to do, right? I mentioned before, I try to keep these day text videos to within 45 minutes because we've got to do other stuff. We've got to work in the world. We've got to take care of things that are important, but that often don't allow us to reflect on these things, on the creatures that Jah made, the earth itself, the plants, the trees. We see them. It's not like we totally forget, but it's easy to get distracted once we stop reading these texts or thinking about the things Jah made. And since the world combines human designs and things with what Jah made, well, there you have it. We have to try to keep our sense of praise around and limit our distractions. But, we do have to do a lot of stuff. That's just a fact. All right, so back to this. Now, the prior videos, as I explained, we ran out of things, but we showed images. We talked about different stuff because it's obvious if you really look at the things that are here and us, we're the product of someone's design. This is not an accident. The things we've talked about previously and what we read today all show consistent marks of design. They're functional. They're doing something in association with their environment in ways that we can identify. They're not useless, these creations and things. They're all beautiful, all perfectly structured, symmetrical. They're not falling over and these kinds of things, on their way to a more evolved shape and condition, right? All these things are just happening to evolve into these perfectly formed, balanced creations with systems that function and feed off each other or their environments in these ways. I mean, come on, that's just not happening. That never happens. We have to make everything that's anything like all of these things, whether it's a car that's like a 4-footed animal, or a plane that's like a bird, or a submarine that's like an ocean creature. So it's if we have to do that, and that's the best we can do. It's good stuff, but these are living things capable of reproducing, feeding off their environment. All this stuff costs tons of money, and it results in usually opposite consequences to what life on Earth is to result in, right? We kill ourselves, we kill everything else. The things we make that are similar to Jah aren't always for a good reason. Maybe they're considered good in the sense that we have to be cautious of other nations and things today. They build these weapons and things. And then there are other types of planes, of course, that we use for travel. But they still they're not as good. They require a lot of fuel. And even though the system works to some extent, the fact is, we model our designs after these things. Let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to show a few images like I've done before. And so we all get a sense of the types of things we just read about. I mean, we can think about what is a land animal, what is a reptile, what other land creatures exist today. I mean, we've seen Dada and Good Girl. I'm sure you have dogs, cats, other things. Well, I mean, think of all the different creatures that you could think of that you've seen on TV. Most of these, we're not around, yet we know they're here. These are magnificent creatures of the ground. Land animals, bears, elephants. Look at all of them are perfect. Look at this giraffe right here. You look at it and you think, okay, well, what does it do? Well, obviously it eats high up, and it provides utility that not other creatures easily do. Look at the balance on it, though. You see, it doesn't drag a super long tail because that wouldn't be efficient for it. It has the legs structured just right with the neck so it doesn't fall over. It can run. I mean, look at these things. I think these things are, I don't know, some of them might not be real. That doesn't quite look real. I know they're not. A couple of these are really weird. Look at this one. So we've got some creative nuts out there. But we're just talking about the real thing, right? Once people get all whacked like this, they start tweaking Jah's designs. It never looks right. It looks retarded. This is what life would be like if it like evolved, right? Because we'd be going through so many different mutated species to get to this one, to get to this. I mean, we'd have to go through this. I mean, even to get to this, right? To get it so it's half right with its legs in the air. To get to that, it would be impossible. Yet to get the perfect balance on these things, I mean, that's not possible. We would have so many fossils of where's those weird things? Those weird designs. My point is we would have a ton of fossils that would be mutations, right? And whole species that don't look right but they're reproducing to the extent to which they need to in order to further evolve in order to be this perfectly formed. Come on, they're all perfectly formed. Every one of them. Look at the elephant. It's got the head, big here, fits with the body, trunk. It's big, but it gets narrow at the end, which is good. Feed the mouth easier, right? And then the tail, too. I've used the example of T-Rex as well, because of the head, the length of the tail, but the little arms. See, T-Rex is not a 4-footed animal in the way that the elephant is. It's different. So it has to be balanced different. It can't have the same length of front arms or feet. And it doesn't. All of these things are perfect. It's just impossible. I would say, even for one, it just doesn't happen. We can't even, we have to make anything that would be even near these kinds of creatures. And I'm not even showing things that are extinct like dinosaurs or prehistoric animals, saber-toothed tigers, all the stuff. You can look it up on your own and amaze yourself. And either believe this is all a happy accident, right? It's so cool and nice, it's happy, but it's just an accident. It's amazing, but wow, I can't believe how many accidents are so amazing. That just doesn't seem right, does it? Accidents are never amazing. That's why they're accidents. They're not right. There's something wrong. Something went wrong, and usually people don't want to keep repeating it. And yet we have all these perfectly formed things. I'm just showing you a few. I mean, I can't even stop with one and then talk about the details of what it does. You know, some of these things we all know what they do. I can't do it because I'd make you late for work. This is a weekday show. And I wouldn't be able to fit in the show. All that I could tell you about the design, the balance, and I'm not even talking about the skin, the fur. I'm talking about the structure, the bone, the cartilage, the muscle, the balance that lets these things do all of this stuff. They're not falling down. They're not having a hard time. They're perfect in their timing. I mean, these things can run down things. You and I, we blink an eye and they're gone. Come on. I mean, this is why I just don't have a lot of patience with evolutionist nuts. I know some people believe in evolution, that is life from non-life. We all believe in the progression of life and the development of species. But that in itself is an indication, I would say, of an intelligent design. We'll talk about that another time. But I'm just focused on the design. The way they look, the balance, the things they can do without showing anything that would suggest that's not what they're supposed to do. You know, that how could it come out this perfectly in all of these creatures without all of the fossil evidence showing the transitions from the type of creature that we see now to what it had to be before it got to this? There's nothing like that at all. People try to create similarities between different primates, you know, for evolution and stuff, but humans are not the same. Just because we have 2 legs and arms and sometimes walk, humans are not like any of these creatures when you really take a good look. We don't have the strength of hands, feet. We don't have the muscle. We don't have the jaw strength. We don't have the skull. We don't have the type of claws and weaponry and predatory design features that allow them to do the things they need to do, whether it's with vegetation or other creatures. We're not the same as these creatures. They just look similar when you look at them structurally with hands and feet and a torso and a head. Well, put on their overlay, right? Put on their skin, their hair. Look at their actual features, their claws, their teeth, their jaws. We're not the same. Not even close. And I'm going to show you why in just a moment. But first, we're not done with the animals yet. I'm just talking about things like remember, it referred to land animals, pack animals, 4-footed animals, crawling things. Let's show some crawling things. I mean, how many of you don't marvel when you see even one insect? Dada's very active back there. So, but you see, look at this guy looking at us right here. I mean, you don't need me to really describe anything. The beauty, the balance, the design, it's just right. These things can fly, and some of them we don't even know how because of their weight to wing ratio, like the bee. These are strong, man. I mean, these things can fall from what would be the equivalent of you and I, like 100 stories to them. And they can still keep going. They're made with strength and power. These little insects. And it's a good thing, too. But if you look at the prehistoric record, these are giant. They were bigger. They didn't evolve from smaller things. These were giant creatures. Giant insects existed because the things that existed early on in creation were also all bigger. Even us, if you want to look for a design feature that would show that, look at your wisdom teeth. That shows at one time our jaws we were bigger in some way. We just don't need them anymore. When we're not as big, we don't live as long. The earth has been cursed, doesn't give forth its productive power the same as it did before, at least according to the biblical record. And yet we still have all these things. Now they're scaled down to match our world. They match us. They're not so big we can't coexist with them. Yet they were bigger before. There's no reason they couldn't have taken over the whole planet unless we were also bigger. Everything was bigger. They were being hunted by bigger creatures. Dinosaurs, bigger lizards, and bigger other things. Some question what category you put dinosaurs in because they don't even know what they're talking about. They go from reptiles to birds. There were birds existing back in the days of the dinosaurs. Archaeopteryx. It's a perfectly formed creature. It has feathers. So it's exactly what the Bible describes. Feathery types. And so they create this false timeline of evolution, that is, those who don't believe in Jaws, the creator of these things, that allows for just this massive period of evolution that, in their view, would allow for enough time for accidents to take place on an already formed Earth, and with enough conditions to sustain this much life. It just gets ridiculous when you start to really put it together and then compare it with these early texts that make it so simple, it seems just right, and there's no real flaw that you could identify. Whereas with evolution, it's not only got flaw, it's not even a fact. It's not provable. It cannot explain where life comes from. It's impossible from that standpoint alone, and to show that this many perfectly formed creatures with obvious utility to an environment that allows for mutual sustaining of the types, that's just not possible. It never happens. That's why I say it's not possible. Evolutionists who don't believe in God believe it is possible. Why? Because they believe it happened. They're not believing in it because it's happening somewhere else and it's okay, this is happening here, this happened there. No, they have nothing. Zero. They're batting zero for whatever. And the one exception they believe is everything. That's it. It happened and that's it. Now everything's perfectly formed, everything's mutually sustaining, all the stuff. I mean, we're just talking about, at this point, the land animals, the insects. Let's look at some reptiles. As I say, it gets ridiculous because you start to realize that the number of creatures that exist today and all the different types of those creatures, right? Whether it's like the two cats that I have that are both cats, but two different cats, yet they can still reproduce with each other, or these different reptiles and creatures that have different processes at times, but that nonetheless are able to reproduce because they're alive. They're perfectly balanced. They can move without, you look at a snake and it just moves with its scales and its muscles, and it is fast. It attacks, it has different things. Think of the vision, think of the eyes. I could isolate just one feature, like eyes, from all these creatures, and it would blow our minds because there's no way you're going to get that kind of precision and utility in all these different eyes that are in this many perfectly formed creatures and that are working according to their environment and type. There's not like an evolution into the eye. We try to maybe see at night, but it doesn't really ever really work, right? We've never developed night vision. Yet, according to evolutionists, we come from creatures in forests or jungles or wherever that would have had much better night vision. You mean to tell me we lost our ability to see during half the day? Half the time we're alive and need to survive? You mean to tell me we lost our fur when we need our fur for hydration, for warmth, especially in cold environments like the Ice Age? We lost our fur. So we have to make clothes to keep ourselves warm? That makes no sense at all. Every single one of these creatures needs nothing. We're the only ones who put clothes on. You mean to tell me we evolved from a state where we didn't need clothes? We evolved from a state where we didn't need weapons because we had them. And we evolved from a state where we had better night vision to less? When we would have been alive and awake and still are at many times, only now we balance our day according to the way we can see because it's not so good at night? That just does not make sense. And our clothes, the Bible even explains why we wear clothes. Every single other creation does not put clothes on. We're the only ones that do. Why? Because as the text said, we're made in Jah's image. We're made in Jah's image. Let us create mankind in our image, man and woman, in our image. That means we're like them. I could get into the same discussion we just had, with, I wanted a video, image there. I could get into it, some older people. We don't look that great when we age, right? So I could get into a discussion. It's still, you can see the symmetry, the beauty, the balance. Humans that still do things that are unusual to living types, like put clothes on, we wear makeup. And I'm not saying all makeup's bad. Don't get me wrong, ladies. It's just that we often do things to our bodies that take away from the things we see in other creatures. You see what I'm saying? I barely scratched the surface, as you know, with these insects. As I say, we could do a whole show with just one feature. My point is, though, that we do things that take away from what we can see clearly in other creatures because they don't do it. They don't do it, and we do. But we're in Jah's image in a way that allows us to choose. And so we're more capable. Remember the text, it said we rule these creatures. We didn't say to eat these creatures. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. My point is the verb, at least in the Greek, is rule, archo. So to rule, to govern, yet at the time that Jah made Adam and Eve, as we'll get to in a moment, or in a few videos, I should say, we'll get more to humans in a moment. You can see that they were naming the animals, that there was no indication to eat them at that time. Maybe they would have, who knows? But that didn't happen until later. Until after they were expelled from the garden in ways where they then desired the meat from the animals. So my point is, we do things differently today than how we were made. And so, even though you can see the beauty, you can see the evidence of design and all of the humans that are out there, we cover it up a lot. We do. We cover it up with clothes, different color hair, or maybe tattoos, different things. If you want to do that, that's up to you. That's the whole point. We get to choose. I've chosen things. I wear clothes, right? We're in that condition. But it doesn't show everything that it would show like it shows on these creations. They don't wear clothes. And as I say, we're going to get to that later in our readings. The Bible actually explains the origin of clothes, and Jah was the first maker. Although that wasn't what he wanted, he did it for our sake because of the things we were choosing. It's like a child you may have that you still love who's choosing the wrong way of life that you can't condone, you can't further, but now they're in trouble in a way where you got to help them kind of at least live right? Maybe you give them something to use to exist in the condition they chose to be in until they get out, right? If you can help them out, you would, but if you can't and they choose to be in it, like Adam and Eve did, then Jah at least gave them something to deal with their condition. We use it today. We've been using it ever since. Because otherwise, the choices that we began to make, we'll talk about it later more, would have made it too difficult to exist. Whereas the way Jah actually made us is not too difficult to exist. We've made it that way. We're still making it that way. So it's not just a legend. The descriptions in the Bible about humans and the way they were originally made in Jah's image. We'll get into the descriptions about what they do further and more about how they were made in later videos. But here basically comes to an end the creation of the land, animals, and humans. The crawling things, all the things that would come on dry land and live primarily on the land. So, humans are made in Jah's likeness. They're the only ones, only creatures, only creations during these days in Genesis that are described like that. That we're the only ones described as ruling or governing all of the other creations on the earth and in the heavens and in the seas. Additional information is given in later readings. So if you're available for tomorrow's video, we'll talk further about what humans are called to do and blessed to do. But at this point, it's important that we note that every single thing that Jah made is balanced, it's perfect, it exists today, and we are ruling them. We are the highest level of creature on the planet. We don't always rule well, that's for sure, but things have changed. We're different. We've done things that have brought curses to the earth that need to be removed so that all humans and animals can be saved, right? Like in our view with the flood of Noah's day. That's how Jesus likens the future time, when Jah will change things so that everything will live according to its type the right way. But we don't put undue emphasis on that day. We just believe it's coming. And we believe that Jah will carry through a great oppression many people, just like he carried Noah and the animals in our view, which we'll talk more about. There's evidence to show all of these things are true or based on the best available evidence. And that's certainly the case when it comes to humans, other than our choices. But you see, at the time we're describing now, we haven't chosen anything bad yet. So all of the descriptions are positive. All of it is good. And humans are made in the image of those who are allowed to choose and who govern all the things of the earth, all the living things of the earth, as a likeness of God, as male and female. Those are the only genders given in the Bible and that we actually have today. That doesn't mean people won't identify with other things, but that doesn't change what has been made. People can identify with whatever they want. Well, we identify the things according to their type, just like in our reading. Here's the text. I highlighted a few things. So, land animals, crawling creatures, other living things. Greek text, four-footed land animals, reptiles, other animals. Land animal according to its type, crawling creature of the ground, animals of the earth, pack animals, reptiles, and mankind, to rule among those creatures as a likeness to God.